Now the MG ZS EV makes a good case for itself if you're looking for a family SUV that happens to be electric. It's got 461 kilometers of range, a spacious, well-packed cabin, and it ducks in under rupees 30 lakhs. But what if you don't want to stretch your budget that far? Then the Nexon EV Max with 437 kilometers of range is a nice option too. Of course, it's smaller, but it's also 7 lakhs less in price, and you get a lot of features with this one as well. So which one should you pick? We'll tell you that today. To be fair, without their EV powertrains, these SUVs wouldn't have been direct rivals. But as it stands, they are your only two choices currently if you have between rupees 20 to 30 lakh to spare on an electric vehicle. Now both these electric SUVs wear their green credentials on their sleeve, but the ZS EV is a bit more shouty about it. To start with, that's mainly due to this new blanked out fascia that came with the facelift. It can polarize opinion, but what we don't like as much is this integration of this charge port. Of course, the placement itself is quite intuitive, which means you can just drive into a charging station and start charging. But earlier, in the way it was integrated into the logo was cleaner. Having said that, the rest of the design is smart, at least on the front. So you have that sharply cut LED headlamp and a similarly sharp sort of, cuts and creases that you find in the bumpers, like here and here. But there is no visual distinction between the Nexon EV Max and other variants of the Nexon, which is a downer. Another distinction is the sharp LED lighting of the ZS EV, which adds a touch more sophistication compared to the simpler projector lighting in the Nexon EV Max. Now the Nexon, on the other hand, when you see it beside the ZS EV, looks a bit more conventional, but that's probably down to how common this car has become now on our streets. But of course, you can't miss it. It's still an EV very clearly, with this blanked out grille, this blue EV lettering and these bright blue highlights. Of course, to Tata Motors' credit, the facelift has been very nicely done, so it still doesn't look like an old car. And these bright colors too help with that fact. Now, as soon as you step inside the ZS EV, you know where that added money that you spent on it has gone. I mean, every surface that you touch is soft, except for the ones here, they're still hard plastics, but generally, the seats, for example, they're leather, the stitching, and all these materials, they have a nice heft, they have a sense of quality to them that is quite appealing, especially considering that this is still under 30 lakhs. So in that sense, the ZS EV has a clear advantage in terms of how it feels, in terms of the perception of quality inside. And of course, it's a bigger car, so that also comes through quite easily. You have this wide space over here, there's a big gap between the seats, a wide tunnel. And also another big advantage that this has over the Nexon EV is in terms of storage spaces. You get these large door pockets here, a large sort of cup holder here, which you can even cover with this nice shade kind of thing, a big cubby hole here. So in terms of practicality, the ZS EV is definitely a step ahead of the Nexon EV. Now the Nexon EV Max is based on the Nexon obviously, and which is a segment lower than the ZS EV, and that shows in the way the cabin is built. So soft touch surfaces are limited to, say, here for your elbow and another one here on the armrest. But having said that, Tata Motors has done its bit to sort of liven up the space. So you get this very distinct sort of finish, this blue sort of highlighting, very discreet, very nicely done here too. And it must be said that the build quality has improved over time, and there is of course some difference. It still can't match the ZS EV, but it's perfectly acceptable at the price point that the Nexon EV Max comes in. Now in terms of features, of course, again the ZS EV has an advantage, but if you look closely, Tata Motors has played it smart. So while you don't get those big ticket feature items like a big touchscreen or a big panoramic sunroof or powered seats, you get some very nice thoughtful additions. The ventilated seats being one of them. They're absolutely essential in our weather. And another one, this lock to sort of open and close the charging port. It's a very Indian thing. It's something that owners of EVs will appreciate. Now another big change in the Nexon EV Max over the standard Nexon EV is this new gear selector, or this whole center console in general. Now this looks like the most premium part of the cabin, to be honest. And this selector with its graphics really does look quite premium. Having said that, that delay that was there in the shifting between the modes in that older, more simpler shifter, that still remains. But again, you still have a park mode. It's just easier to use with this new design. Also, like the ZS EV, you get these physical buttons for the regen modes and the drive modes, which are nice. But again, you get more physical buttons in the Nexon EV with the climate control. So in terms of usability, there's not too much difference between the two cars. Now the big difference comes in terms of practicality, where the Nexon really doesn't score very highly. This center new design with the wireless charger and the small cubby hole here has eaten into space for cup holders. There's really no place for you to put cups anywhere in the front, which is a big drawback. And the bottle holders too are recessed behind, which aren't that great. And as you'll see, that continues in the back seat as well. So practicality is not really the Nexon EV Max's strong suit. The Tata only gets a single pane sunroof and limited connected features. But both get auto headlamps and wipers, cruise control, climate control, which is far more effective in the Nexon, and tilt steering adjustment. The ZS EV does better with its safety features, offering 6 airbags, 360-degree cameras, blind spot monitoring, rear cross traffic alert, and lane change assist. You even get rear seatbelt warnings, a great addition given the current talk on the matter. The Nexon EV Max makes do with 2 airbags and a single rear camera, but both get TPMS and a useful hill descent control function along with stability control. Now, like the rest of the cabin, this instrumentation in the ZS EV also looks more premium than the Nexon at first glance at least, and it has quite a few benefits. For example, you have these nice digital readouts for the speed and the power that you're using, and this central diagram also gives you a very clear idea what's happening with the SUV. Among the things that we don't like is this very small readout for the range. I mean, we think it could have been a much larger display, taking up a bit more screen space, and the same is true for this regen mode as well as the battery state level. These could have been larger icons, considering they are the most important stats that you are looking at most times. Although completely opposite is this trip data, which is again very nicely laid out, very legible. So you have a great idea what's happening with the car in terms of how efficiently you're driving. The MG ZS EV gets a larger battery pack with this update, growing from 44.5 kWh to 50.3 kWh. The one in the Tata Nexon EV Max is notably smaller at 40.5 kWh, but still quite a bit larger than the 30.2 kWh of the standard Nexon EV. Having said that, there's less of a gap in the two SUVs' ranges.
Hi, electric man.
Hi, Bob. So I spent the whole day driving these two electric SUVs.
Electric.
They're the most popular ones in India currently. So now I'd like you to tell me what you think about that. So should we go for a spin?
Sure, let's go. You've kept any electric juice left in there?
Of course, enough for you to figure out what's what.
And is the engine running? There's no engine, it's a motor. How much range have you left for me to use?
There's still 143 kilometers in this one.
Where does it say? 143.
Yeah.
But that's so small.
Yeah,
to
exactly.
It's like they don't want you to know the range.
Almost like that's to look quite closely to sort of see it.
And you know, when you have reading glasses like I do, separate ones,
Yeah.
then it's even a little more difficult. But normal cars, you look at the RPM meter, the speedometer, fuel, engine temperature maybe.
Yeah.
Here now you're looking at how much is the battery charge, what's the regeneration that's happening.
Yeah, exactly. And these are such important factors, right? Considering people are still getting used to driving these cars.
So am I. Huh?
Yeah.
You are the electric man. You are the one who spent a lot of time behind the wheel of electric vehicles. But really, I'm looking at all these displays.
Yeah.
What I visualize as someone who's driving EV vehicles, you're going to be looking at this screen far more than you would in a conventional internal combustion engine car. Because you really want to know what's your battery condition like, what's the charging happening, what's the range, because it keeps changing.
Yeah.
And given on the way you're driving, which mode you're in, I believe all these cars, now this one has how many modes? 3 modes?
It has 3 drive modes and then 3 more regen modes, so you have a wide permutation of driving sort of feel coming out of it.
So which means once you start using it on a regular basis, living with the vehicle, you learn that these are my driving conditions, this is my daily commute, and this is the setup that works best for me.
In that sense, I found that the Nexon EV Max was a bit clearer with its range sort of estimate, because it will change with each drive mode and then it will further change with each regen level. So you always have a fair idea of the amount of range that you
get in if you use which mode. And so let's say you're coming to a situation where you're in that last 50-75 kilometers range, and you say, okay, now this is the best option to choose, this is the best mode to go for, this is the best regen to go for, and I can maximize my range by using these.
Yeah, exactly. Sadly, this one doesn't do it in such a detailed manner. It will just change it according to the drive mode you're in, but you do get those clear sort of displays showing you the consumption and the trip data, so that way there is some respite in a way.
Very interesting. I mean, the cars are going to now require a lot more intelligent drivers, people who can figure out the modes they want, the regions they want, and these were things, I mean, you never consider in a regular IC vehicle.
Yeah, definitely. And just to quickly, in your short time that you spent driving these cars, what did you think about the way they drive? Just a quick one.
See, I found the Nexon actually rides very well. The overall feel in this car, I mean, of course, it's far more spacious and everything. The driving position, I find this one's better. And but it's yet, the fact that there is the complete absence of sound from, I won't say the engine, from the motor. And the way you get your instant torque and this throttle response, it's enjoyable, but at the same time, it's going to take me a little while to shift over to this completely.
In our real-world range testing, we managed 390 kilometers from the MG and 355 from the Nexon EV Max in city driving. Both were driven on the same route in the eco mode and highest regen levels. There's a smaller gap in highway driving, the ZS EV managing 342 kilometers while the Tata doing 299 kilometers. The lighter weight and more aggressive regen helped the Nexon EV Max seemingly, while the ZS EV's better outputs maybe keep it less stressed at highway speeds. Now you don't get such an expansive view out the front of the Nexon EV, and the steering position too could be less awkward. The steering wheel is at a slightly awkward angle, it juts out like this, so finding a nice driving position isn't as easy as in the ZS EV. But that said, the steering feels much more natural. It is quite heavily weighted, which means that it can take a bit of effort in traffic, but the trade-off for that is a good one. You have a good idea what the car is doing at most times. There's good control coming through the wheel, so that's a big positive. But really what stands out with the Nexon EV is its ride quality. Of course, you have that typical low speed, firmness that you get in most EVs, that's still present, but it's never uncomfortable. So even over imperfection, it's well damped, which means that nothing really is jarring inside the cabin and everything feels soothing, and which goes very well with the generally quiet demeanor that you have with EVs. So in that case, the Nexon EV will handle most imperfections very well. There's not too much thudding or sharpness coming in from the road up into the cabin. So that way this is definitely the more comfortable car of the two. Now with EV driving, you always need to know how much range you have left, or what the status of the battery is. And in that sense, the Nexon EV does a better job of it than the ZS. The range indicator is more accurate, so with each drive mode it changes the range readout, which the ZS EV also does, but the Nexon EV goes a step further. The Nexon EV Max, that's the one that gets the regen mode, to change the range readout with each regen level. So in that case, you always have a very clear idea of how far you can go with the charge that you have. Also quite nice, and this is true for both cars, is the way they shift their driving character with each mode. Now, the main difference that you notice with these driving modes is the change in the throttle response. So for say the same throttle pressure that you're applying, you notice that the car is delivering more power, and that genuinely does add to the driving experience. There's some difference to be garnered from switching between the modes. Of course, the eco mode will make it more efficient. The city mode in both cars is probably the one that you should spend most of your time in. But that being said, the eco mode isn't too labored in either of the cars. So if you are in a charge crunch, so to speak, then you can always use the eco mode as well. They don't dial down the AC too much either. The MG ZS EV has seen a fair bump in power with this facelift, a 36 PS increase to 179 PS, while torque has actually dropped by 70 Nm to 280 Nm. The Nexon EV Max 2 has a 13 PS and 5 Nm more than the standard one at 143 PS and 250 Nm. It's no surprise then that in outright acceleration, the ZS EV is a brisk car with a 0 to 100 kmph time of 7.5 seconds. The Max is notably slower at 8.8 seconds, but to put it in context, it'll still blitz anything this side of a diesel Tucson. A point to note though is that it's easier to access this performance in the ZS EV. The drop in torque has quelled torque steer, which the Nexon EV still suffers to some extent from. Also, the full performance is available in all three drive modes, Eco, Normal and Sport. The Nexon EV Max will give you reduced outputs in the Eco and City modes, the full performance only available in Sport. There's always enough performance even in Eco mode to pass slower cars or fill in gaps in traffic in both EVs. If anything, the ZS EV does have a more precise throttle pedal, and the switch over to regen is a bit more apparent under your right foot. In either case, overtaking performance in both is about as potent as anything else on the road, with both dropping below 2 seconds in all three of our testing ranges. An added positive with the Nexon EV Max is its stronger regen in the highest of the three modes that both SUVs come with. Neither gets one pedal driving, but the Tata slows right down to a 10 km/h crawl that is more useful in stop-go traffic, unlike the roughly 20 kmph of the MG. You get an additional coasting mode in the Nexon EV Max, which could be useful on the highway, although both could have done with paddles for better access to switching between the regen levels. Now the MG, it gives you a great view out to start with, so you feel very confident driving it in tight city conditions. And the steering is also very light. In whichever mode you choose, it's lighter than in any of the settings in the Nexon EV, which means that maneuvering in traffic generally is easier. But having said that, the feel from the steering leaves a bit to be desired. It feels a bit too artificial, a bit too assisted, which we don't like all that much, but we think most people might like the lighter feel of it, especially in city driving, as compared to the Nexon. Now at higher speeds, the ZS EV is steady, stable, as you would expect these cars to be, but the low speed ride leaves something to be desired again. It's like you see, it's not very well damped, so a bump like that you just saw, you feel it very apparently in the cabin, which does make a pokemark streets quite uncomfortable. And also that's because of the stiffer damping. But the suspension setup generally is quite soft, which means that you will notice a bit of wallowing, a bit of body movements in the ZS EV. Say even when you're going in a straight line, if you fall into a dip, a wide dip, you will notice that the car makes maybe one or two movements more than it needs to before it settles down. So in terms of driving pleasure, in terms of comfort, overall the Nexon EV has a slight edge in terms of ride quality. Now another factor that plays into this characteristic of the ZS EV is the very high 41 psi recommended tire pressure, which maybe reduces the rolling resistance, which is why MG has sort of recommended that, but it does sort of enhance these minor flaws that this SUV has. But having said that, in terms of refinement, especially at higher speeds, the MG is still ahead of the Nexon EV. Because it's an EV, you don't have any engine noise, so you notice wind and tire noise more. And in that sense, the ZS EV does have the Nexon well covered. The 7 lakh rupee gap may seem vast, but effectively you have two capable EVs at both ends of a price range. Your budget might be a big factor, but either will suffice as a great urban commuter that keeps range anxiety at bay. Pick the ZS EV if you like the space, features and generally plush ambience, or choose the Nexon EV Max for its driving dynamics or efficiency. It's sheer value putting it just ahead.